You know the story of the first Dominican martyred in Japan? When people discuss missionary efforts in Japan, the first two groups that get mentioned are the Jesuits, which were the first Christian group to reach Japan, which they did in 1549, and then the Franciscans, who arrived in the 1590s. What's often forgotten is that Dominicans and Augustinians began sending missionaries in the early 1600s, and priests not affiliated with any order began arriving as well. The first Dominican martyr was Alphonsus Navarrete. He was born in Valladolid, Spain, and entered the Dominican order in his hometown at the Priory of St. Paul. 4 years later, he was sent to the province of the Holy Rosary in the Philippines. He served there for several years, then returned to Europe to recruit new people for mission work in the Far East. Once back in the Philippines, he was selected to go to Japan and arrived there in 1611. In Japan, Father Alphonsus dedicated himself to the sick and children, co-founding a mission for the sick and dedicating himself to baptizing children. When the shogunate told the missionaries to leave the country in 1614, Father Alphonsus was one of 7 Dominicans that went into hiding, continuing to support Japanese Christians as best he could, despite a lingering illness that seemed to plague him. In 1617, Father Alphonsus heard that the 2 missionaries serving the domain of Amora had been martyred. One was a Jesuit named John Baptiste de Tavora. The other was a Franciscan named Peter of the Assumption. Father Alphonsus felt moved to do his best to replace their efforts. In late May, he began his journey to Amora, joined by 2 laity and an Augustinian missionary named Father Ferdinand Ayala. Father Ferdinand was the only Augustinian left in Japan, and he had been working with the Dominicans to be more effective. Father Ferdinand was also joined on the trip by his own assistant. The group reached a small city and began holding Mass and taking confessions. But after 4 days, the crowds grew too great for them not to be noticed. They were taken prisoner and brought before the Lord of the Domain, who ordered their execution. Because the Christian crowds were too great, the soldiers began looking for a remote location to perform the execution. They visited several islands off the coast of Amora, including the one where the prior 2 missionaries had been executed, but they were still followed by Christians. On June 1st, they finally found a location, and both priests were beheaded. Father Ferdinand was first, and he supposedly kissed the sword before his beheading. He was then followed by Father Alphonsus. Each man became the first martyr in Japan for his order. 1 or 2 assistants were also beheaded. The records on this are unclear. What happened next, though, was startling, and I only have one source that mentions it. Fearing the creation of a Christian shrine, the soldiers opened the coffins of the first 2 martyrs. They then put Father Alphonsus with John Baptist, the Jesuit, and they put Father Ferdinand with Peter, the Franciscan. Both coffins were weighted down and then dumped at sea. The sword used in the execution was then sold to Christians and sent to the Dominican office in the Philippines. For those of you who like to do research on topics I discuss, I must mention up front that this one will create confusion. Another member of the Dominican order in Japan was also named Father Alphonsus. Online discussions about both these men often mix their biographical details. The second Father Alphonsus was also from Spain, but he was from Logroño, and he was burned at the stake on September 10th, 1622, along with a group of other martyrs led by famed Jesuit Charles Spinola. Thank you for watching. Please follow, subscribe, like, and share my videos.